Welcome to the Longest Turn Board Gaming Podcast. This is episode 5, Railways of the World. My name is Tyler.
Hello, this is Kevin.
This is Tyson.
In this episode, we are going to talk about train games.
Woo, woo.
Whoa.
Whoa, yeah, we're starting with that. All right.
We are going to do a feature review of Railways of the World, and we've also been playing lots of train games lately. So let's talk about what we've been playing. The other night, we actually did the trifecta Iron Rail games by Capstone Games. We played Irish Gauge and then Ride the Rails and Iberian Gauge. So we're going to talk about those for a minute. And all of these have art done by Ian O'Toole, which they all look amazing on the table. They each offer a different experience. I'm going to talk about Irish Gauge a little bit, which originally came out in 2014. The designer is Amabel Holland. And like I said, the artist is Ian O'Toole. And this came out, the reprinted version with the Ian O'Toole art came out a couple of years ago. But this is a fairly generic train game. You're building rails in Ireland, and you only have 4 actions available to you. The game starts out with a stock auction where 5 shares of stock are auctioned off, 1 from each railroad line, and then it goes from there. So you have 4 actions available to you. One of them is to auction another stock off. One of them is to collect dividends, which is how you gain money from some of the cities that you've connected with the railroad companies that you're invested in. The other actions available to you are turning a town into a city, which helps you to gain more money during dividends, and then obviously also building railways. It's a really simple, fairly quick game. It was I think it was the first play for all of us. I don't know. What do you guys think? How did it go? It didn't seem like anybody was jumping at the bit to play it again.
Yeah, I mean, I liked it, but as you said, it's a really simple train game. I don't know if there's a whole lot of depth to it or a whole lot of replayability. It's tough to say that after one play, but that's the initial impression I get. I did like it, though. I had a good time playing it.
I did, too.
There's not a lot of variability to the setup. So, like, you have trains of the varying colors start in the exact same location every game. The difference is, the part that I actually really like is the difference of, I think, all of them is you have this dividend option. You can create cities that have a specific color, so black, white, or pink, and these colors are going to define what cities they are. And what's really cool, I thought, about this one, the main thing that I enjoyed about it was the fact that you have a bag full of these cubes, and you can take one of your 4 actions is to, what is it, dividends? Is like I can't remember what the action is specifically called, but you can make the cities pay based off of what rail lines are there. So basically, I'm going to draw 3 cubes out on the board, and I'm going to put it's going to either be a combination of black, white, or pink. So it could be all blacks or all of the different 3 colors. But what I really liked about that was the whole fact that it determined each time that happened which cities were going to pay. So you want to diversify what your cities are, so that you can maximize the potential payouts.
Or you can take a chance and just, go with 1 or 2 colors and try and get lucky and get big payouts, right?
And ideally, you're trying to get stock in each of the railroad companies. And that actually hurt me bad. There were, people are auctioning off stock and everybody's spending their money. And then at one point, I was the only person left with money, but I couldn't afford the cheapest stock. So I ended up having only 3 stock certificates at the end of the game, and it showed in the scores.
Which I do think creates an interesting dynamic, because essentially I can make you think I want to invest in a certain trade, like stock option, and I can, on my turn, initiate an auction for that. and I can bid it up and make you spend a lot of money so that it basically forces you out of any other stock bidding throughout the round, which I thought was fun because you had the option to be like, oh, well, I didn't actually care about that stock. Really, I wanted this one over here, and now I'm the only one who can get it.
You bid it up. Yeah, that I was going to mention that. The auction, I think, was the most interesting part of the game to me. And timing when you purchase stocks, and like you said, Tyson, bidding up stocks so that you know that person can't buy stocks in the next round. Is it the dividends when you get money?
Yes.
Okay. So there was one time when I was going to do that.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, I'm in a perfect position now to buy this stock because nobody else can afford it. And then you, right before me, like a jerk, did the dividend. And you were planning that. You saw it the whole time.
I saw it happening, right? But it was.
And I was hoping you didn't see it. But yeah, and all of a sudden everybody has money, right? So it's like I can't do.
But that's a choice I have to make too, because exactly what you just said, Kevin. Now everybody has money, right? So me starting that dividend didn't just mean that now I have money. It means that you still probably want to start an auction for that. And you had the most money in the previous round and you hadn't started one. So you theoretically would have more money than anybody else if you're playing active.
But I wasn't able to get the stock for the lowest price.
Right.
So it was going to be bid up. That's an interesting part of the game.
I agree the auction part is the best part of the game. There was one other mistake I made. I started expanding one of the rail lines a little bit, and then I was like, oh, I could hit all 3 of the hub cities or the major cities, which then gives you a dividend of $12 or whatever, right? However, because I had expanded down to a couple other cities, there now were not enough
limited trains
to get to all 3. So it was the double whammy, that and then not being able to buy a stock after everybody else had bought one before the next dividends happened. I didn't end up with a lot of stock. It was still a fun play. There's not a lot there. It's a fun experience. I'm not sure if I'm going to keep this one in my collection, but it was a good start. I mean, it was a little bit of a slow start to the night, but we picked up steam after a while.
I see what you did there. So the next stop that we're going to is Ride the Rails, right?
Right.
How many train puns can we get into this episode?
We got a few coming.
Ride the Rails. Ride the Rails is the second game in this Iron Rail series from Capstone Games. This one is designed by John Borer, and obviously the art is, again, Ian O'Toole. This one, I think, I like the looks of all of them, but I think the box art on this one stands out from the other two because
it's orange.
It's orange, yeah. So it stands out. And this one, I think, is slightly different than either of the other two that we've talked about or will be talking about, in that on this one, there's a pick up and deliver mechanic going on in this game, which I think is the defining difference between them. All of these are going to be you're placing rail lines on a board on a map. What's cool about Ride the Rails is that this comes with a map of the United States, but you can also get a map of Australia, Canada, France, and or Germany. So this one has, I think, a little bit more potential for mixing up some things. But the gist of this game is every round, every player is going to get stock in a rail line. Sounds like the other one, except this one is guaranteed. There is no bidding. There's no auction mechanic in this one. Instead, everybody by default is going to get it. But only a certain color of rail line is available from the beginning of the game. So in the start of the game, first round, it's a red or blue train. And after 6 rounds, all the trains are available, and the 6th round is the end of the game. So when that happens, everybody checks how much money they have, and the game ends. The overall objective is have the most money. And to do that, you have the ability to take these people in different cities and let them ride the rails. So the more
hobos.
Yeah, Tyler kept thinking that these were hobos, which doesn't make any sense because how are you making monies off of somebody who is hitching
Well,
the
they
ride?
generate
That's actually a good
income for
point.
the local communities that they travel to.
The hobos do?
Yeah, I mean, a little bit.
That's true.
Government support.
They're not paying for tickets.
Okay, well, I still envision hobos riding the rails.
It does have a little bit of a vagabond kind of a vibe to it.
Maybe that's an expansion idea.
Ooh.
Yeah, you want to deliver certain people to them, but you don't want to get too many hop-ons to
Nice,
your
I
rail.
like it.
Yeah. No, that's not included at all in this game, but you're going to take these passengers and get them to a destination city. And the more rail lines that you go through, the more money that you will collect individually. However, the interesting part is that you have stock in different colors of rails, and you can ride any rail that connects, and regardless of rail line and if you have stock, but every color that you go through, anybody who has stock in that rail line is going to get a payout as well. So you have to make the decision of, am I going to go as far as I possibly can to maximize my money output, but also potentially pay out other people on these rail lines?
And there can be up to 2 people on one hex, right? So sometimes you're making the choice, do I take this color or do I take this color? Yeah.
Which was an interesting decision because we did do that. Kevin and I had invested in a orange rail line.
Which was a terrible thing to do.
Which was a terrible idea.
It was down in Florida.
Yeah,
Never invest in railroads in Florida.
Yeah.
We didn't, not many hobos were riding on our train.
Because there was already a blue line that went that exact way. And so whenever somebody rode the blue line, we didn't get any payout for that
Right.
on our orange train. But in the end, there was some advantages slightly in that we could say, oh, I don't want to give any blue people. I just want Kevin to get money. And that's better than the winners of this game getting money.
So I lost by a little less.
Right.
Yeah.
And 100 points.
Yeah, right.
I thought it was hilarious that, you know, there's bonus points awarded for connecting a transcontinental link, right? And we started building towards that, and then nobody wanted to give anybody
Go
the
away.
bonus points. So, you know, the railroad that started on the West Coast just kind of moved south after some squiggly circles. And I mean, it was hilarious that
It was funny, but kind of weird at the same
yeah,
time.
it's
Right?
like, man, we can't cooperate enough to complete a transcontinental railroad.
Yeah, and I thought that was an interesting part of the game where there's a little bit of cooperation.
There
just
is.
a little bit, because we were working together, me and Tyler, slightly.
Until you backstabbed me.
Did I
and
bet? Well, that's fun to do, right?
Went somewhere else on your last turn after a little bit of quarterbacking from Tyson.
Yeah.
What did I backstab you?
You were in the means to give Tyler the option to make the transcontinental.
Well, that's not backstabbing.
Not
if I-
that. No,
no?
you could have delivered a guy on the a hobo on the Black Railroad line. You would have gotten 21 points, and I would have scored 15, and you went some other East Coast route after listening to Tyson, which is fine.
Oh, okay. All right.
I don't recall
know. I
specifics,
don't remember.
but
I must have blacked out for a minute.
Yeah.
Oh, I was hot over this one.
we were both in dead last positions. So yeah, we were both in dead last positions. So I don't think that we had a whole lot of chance. So listening to me over Tyler, I think was the right decision, whether or not what I was saying was right.
I don't know. I don't know.
Ben ended up winning.
He did.
He did. But it was, of all the three, and we'll talk about Iberian Gauge in a minute, I enjoyed the play of Ride the Rails the most. And I do think there is more replayability there because of the extra maps that you can purchase.
And that was one thing that I was going to mention is that those maps, they're not just necessarily just a different layout that you could play. They each add different types of mechanics. Now, granted, none of these games are very heavy or deep games. Each of them have a one paper rule sheet that is double-sided, and so they're pretty quick and easy to get into, which is a nice feature about them, I think. But I did like that you could have the different maps for Ride the Rails, which allows you to get slightly different experiences here and there.
And it's by far the biggest map of the three, right? And it does look. We've talked a little bit about the Ian O'Toole art and how it looks. I just think it just looks gorgeous on the table. And as more trains get put out there, it just is interesting. I love the look of it.
And generally, train games do not have great art. I mean, look at 18XX games, and they're kind of hideous, right? I mean,
yeah, they're not known for that.
Yeah,
it's not their strong point. Yeah.
This one had a little bit more to it than Irish Gauge, but I agree, still not that heavy of a game. It was pretty quick to pick up and play.
Yep. Well, the third one that we played is Iberian Gauge. So similar to the other two, Iberian Gauge had art done by Ian O'Toole. It is designed by Amabel Holland, and it plays 2 to 5 players, or 3 to 5 players actually. So Iberian Gauge, similar to the other two, it's a pretty simple game. It just has, 2 sides of a single sheet of paper worth of rules, easy to get through. The way that it plays is to start off the game, you have 5 different railroads, and this is the only random part of the game. You shuffle those up, and there's a slot next to the board where they fit into, and you put these 5 different railroads next to the board, and there's either 4, 5, or 6 places that you can put cubes in these railroads. So the game plays over, I think it's 10 rounds, and it starts off with the stock phase. So in the stock phase, you will take one of your cubes, and you will place it on the topmost section of one of the railroads, like the first available spot. And then if you're the first one to do that, you set the stock price. So I believe it's, from 12 to 18 or something like that. You set that stock price, you bump up the dividend, and then it goes to the next person. They have a choice. They can either invest in the same railroad or they can invest in a different railroad. If they invest in a different railroad, they set that stock price, and it goes around the table until everybody passes. And usually that's when everybody runs out of money and they can't invest in any more railroads. That's the stock phase. And then you build. The next phase is build. And what's interesting about the game is when you purchase stocks, it goes into the treasury of the railroad. When you build, you take money from the treasury and you use that to build on the board. So you go from top to bottom on those railroads. And if you have a cube, you can build, and you just go down until you get through all the railroads. It's kind of rinse and repeat. You build, and then there's maybe another stock buying phase, and then you build again. Some rounds have 2 build phases before a stock phase. And you keep on playing until you get to that last build phase. Whoever has the most money is the ultimate winner of the game at the end of the game. That's kind of a quick rundown of the rules. What do you guys think of Iberian Gauge?
I liked this one. So this is the only one of the 3 that I've played twice. I played this one twice, first at a 3-player count, and then this most recent time when we played all 3 in the same night at 4 players. That 3-player count game, I was really excited by everything. I loved the fact that you could buy into these stock options and then use the treasury money. And if you have it set up right where you're in 2 different train lines in play order, you could funnel money from one train company to the other train company and then funnel it back for the next round so that you are continually getting this cycle of money, which I thought was really, really interesting. But that was at 3-player. I think we found the experience was a lot more tight and harder in a 4-player count.
Yeah, there wasn't a lot of free monies to be had in the treasuries. We spent those pretty quick. We bought up all the stocks pretty quick, so there was for the most part, the train lines were not getting additional monies added to their treasury.
If there's unpurchased stocks, then dividends go into that treasury. There wasn't a whole lot of that in this game. And I didn't mention in the rules that the way that you're talking about kind of funneling money back and forth is when you lease tracks from another railroad. If you lease a track, then that money doesn't go back to the bank. That money goes to the other railroad. And that's how you're moving money back and forth. And I agree with you, Tyson. That's probably the most interesting part of the game. If you can get that to work out, it's interesting. But in our 4-player game, it just seemed like no matter what we did, we couldn't get more money into those
Like
railroads.
And it
right?
didn't take much for people who weren't as invested in a railroad line to derail it.
I see. Yeah.
What treasury money we did have. So, and I think that's what ultimately. So, funny story. I was my brain was mush after working all day Saturday and then playing 2 games.
After the betrayal, that was my move on the prior game, right?
It wasn't a betrayal. I mean, I think I still would have lost by a few points to Ben, but
your spirits were down. You were dejected. We get it.
Yeah, right.
I had lost some momentum, but I was picking up steam. So yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Keep them coming.
Did I already use that one?
You did use that one.
And you probably won't be the last time either.
All these games, can they? I like train games, but these games end in ties, right? Railroad ties.
Oh my gosh.
That one was the worst one.
That was like a really long setup for not a big payoff.
Remember how you started this whole part saying,
so anyway,
a really funny story?
Yeah, a really funny story.
I want the funny part.
We got on a tangent. Well, so funny story. My brain was mush by the time Kevin started explaining the 1-page rules front and back, right? I listened, but I was just like, I didn't put any thought into what the strategy was. And so for the first couple of rounds, I just kind of copied what Kevin did. Well, before long, because there was 4 players and there weren't a lot of available choices in what stocks to invest in, I did start trying to make my own decisions, but Kevin was always the first player. And so he always invested in the one that I was about to invest in. And it turned out that we had the exact same ownership for the rest of the game. And I might as well have gone and taken a nap because
we played the same game.
We did. And
with the exact same outcome.
And in the end, we did not have enough money in the treasury that we needed to have money in to connect. And we took a huge stock hit. When you can't build a railroad to a city in a round, it takes a stock price hit. And we took that hit at the end. Ben, who bought this really crummy stock all by himself, started it out weak at the beginning of the game. It shot up at the end and he destroyed us. And I think
which was cool to see.
It was.
It was not cool to see our demise.
No.
Because we tanked it right at the end for sure.
And because of, we ended up basically playing the same and having the same score. Like this of the 3, this is the game that I would like to have a second shot at the most. I had the most fun playing Ride the Rails, but I'd like to play this one again the most and give it another try.
See, and for me, I felt so I played Iberian Gauge with Kevin the week prior, 2 weeks prior or whatever. And then we came to this night and did Irish and then Ride the Rails. After Ride the Rails, I would have said, if you had asked me which of the 3 are your favorite, I would have said Iberian Gauge because of that 3-player experience. But coming in and then playing it there in a 4-player game, it was not as great of an experience. I didn't like a lot of what was happening. And part of that, I think, was, you mentioned it briefly, Tyler, that turn order was critical. You were right before Kevin every time.
Right after.
You were right after Kevin every time. Well, and then I was in 4th. So I had the decision every time to make, well, who do I go with? Do I go with Kevin and Tyler, or do I go with Ben, or do I try and do my own thing? And I had the least potential for being able to make decisions that weren't necessarily obvious. Like there were certain decisions that were like, well, I can't not do this, because there was just some weird decisions to make in the 4th player's spot. And what I didn't like was that it was so hard to get that player order to change, and almost not worth it to get that player order to change most of the game.
That's one thing. I think I was first in initiative the whole game, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Maybe there was one round where I wasn't, and it was probably the last
round.
It was the last round,
which didn't matter.
Right? Yes,
yeah, because we knew exactly.
That time.
Yeah, we knew exactly what was going to happen at that point.
We had switched it so that we could get the last 2 remaining stocks. So essentially, what I did was I could either buy a stock in one train at the end of the game the round before, or I could pass my turn to change the player order and then buy that stock next round.
And it would have been the same result.
And it would have been the exact same result.
Yeah. I think out of the three, I've played Iberian Gauge 3 times now. First was with my family. That wasn't a great experience. Played with you and Dan, and that was a really fun game, even though you ran away with it, but it was a lot of fun. 4-player wasn't great, but I think out of the 3, I like Iberian Gauge the best. The decisions that you make, it's kind of a cooperative game a little bit until somebody owns more stock and then you're trying to backstab them and drain money out of the treasury. But that cooperative element, that trying to get money back into your, the treasuries where you own stock is just kind of it's interesting. I don't think any of the games really excite me a whole lot. And I don't know how much I'm going to go back to any of them, really. I'm happy to play them, but they don't jazz me up a whole lot.
But is it worth keeping that spot on your shelf for Iberian Gauge, or do you need to replace it with something else?
I'd probably replace it. Yeah. Of the 3, I like it the best, but I'd probably replace it.
So, and I have Ride the Rails, and I like Ride the Rails for its simplicity. The cool thing about, all of these games is basically all the rules are right there on the board for you, basically. And so it's really easy to teach, really easy to get into. So as an entry-level gateway-style game, I think Ride the Rails has great potential for that. And it's not overly complex, and it's not too cutthroat. Like, I think Iberian Gauge has the potential to be more cutthroat than Ride the Rails.
I agree, yeah.
But there is some competition. So I'm going to hold on to Ride the Rails only because I bought the Australia and Canada map pack. So I would like to see how those ones play because I have some difference there. But I don't imagine that there's going to be a whole lot of plays coming out of this one, except for with like introducing it to people.
would like to play those maps, and I think if this game, if all of them were available on BGA, we would definitely play them.
Oh, absolutely.
I don't see my family playing Irish Gauge, so I don't know. I'm probably not going to hang on to it. I was a little annoyed. I came home the other night and I thought I'd lost one of my train pieces. Guess how I found it? I followed the tracks. But then I accidentally dropped it down the stairs. Fortunately, it didn't receive any buck scars. I'm keeping it live and interesting. And I think it's...
Wait, is that what it is?
I don't know.
Yeah, I think
you guys are both smiling.
Yeah.
I don't know if our audience is
smiling as in... I'm worried about what this does for you.
Fair enough.
Our listeners are dropping like flies, maybe? No?
Ouch.
Oh, no.
All right. Should we move on?
Let's do it.
Okay. So another train game that we got to the table is Imperial Steam. And this thing is a beast. It is a complex, tight game. It is from Capstone Games. It is designed by Alexander Humer, who also did the design for Lignum, but I've never played that. The artist is Andreas Resch, and the art is very captivating. He has many credits to his name. I noticed there was Gugong and Paris, and there are...
He's the Game Brewer artist. He does all of Game Brewer's games, essentially.
He's got a ton of credits. But for me, immediately the art and the design jumps out. This is a beautiful game, and it's a beautiful train game. It's very complex, like I mentioned. It's 2 to 4 players, and it plays in a couple of hours. You and your opponents start out in the city of Vienna, and you are trying to expand your railroad network. You're doing things like hiring workers, building tracks, building factories, train stations, taking contracts, trying to attract investors, selling stock, buying more trains, upgrading your trains, lots of train game actions going on. However, because you all start in Vienna, It is very competitive. There are many paths that branch out from Vienna, but you are competing to get to cities first so that you can get various bonuses. You're also competing for slots to build warehouses so that you can deliver and produce goods. You can buy goods from a market that is very similar to the market in Brass. It's just very competitive. It's very tight. It can be very unforgiving. There are a number of things that I love about this game. One of the things that I find is really interesting is that the scoring outcome can completely change based on whether or not somebody makes it all the way from Vienna to, I believe it's Trieste, Italy. If a player reaches Trieste from Vienna, the scoring completely changes for the game. If no player reaches Trieste, then all of the contracts are ignored. Whereas if a player reaches Trieste, all the contracts are scored. If you fulfill the contract, you score tons of money, or it can be negative if you haven't completed some of them and you take a big hit. Also, the player that reaches Trieste scores lots of money for their railroad network and all the links that it took to get there. Plus, the players who didn't reach Trieste in the end game scoring have to lease the tracks of the player that did, or the players that did, whatever the closest possible route is there from their closest city. They have to lease those tracks and pay money to the player that reached the city of Trieste. Whoever has the most money at the end of the game wins.
That's a lot. The game's a lot.
Yeah, it's a complicated game.
There's a lot going on, and it's one of those games where you kind of just have to suffer through your first play. I taught this game. I tried to explain some of the intricacies of it. You really have to just experience it to see how the scoring works out and how valuable some of the actions are. One thing I do love about it, though, is you're planning ahead a little bit, and money is scarce in this game.
All resources are scarce.
Everything's scarce, and it's a tooth and nail fight to try and build tracks, but also trying to figure out, how am I going to get my next cash inflow? Am I going to sell my stock to the investors, but then take a 10% hit per stock that I sell at the end of the game? Or am I going to be able to deliver a good to a hub city? You're also trying to increase your reputation so that you can hire workers in certain cities and gain other benefits. There's a lot going on in this game. You really just got to suffer through the first play, I think. If nobody reaches the city of Trieste, then the scores are in the 1s, 2s, 300 range. If someone does reach the city, then they jump up into the 800 or 900 range because of the contract scoring, because of some of the other payouts that happen from other players. I don't know. What did you guys think?
I think you suffer is that's a very good word to describe what you could experience as a first play for this game. You mentioned the discrepancy of scores, that it can be pretty high if somebody gets to Trieste. That's how it was in our initial play. So Tyson and I, we were kind of at the bottom end there, and you and Ben were at the top end, right? So I think we were around 150. You guys were 700 range. I did not play optimally. Not even close to optimally, and it's tough to do it in an initial play. And I've sucked that bad playing other games, but the score has not been that big, right? So it was a little deflating. Again, didn't play optimally, but it was a little deflating having such a difference in score when I didn't feel like I played bad enough to necessitate that difference, right?
So I think for me, and I've done a lot of reflecting on this because same experience as you, Kevin. I had the same, I think you even beat me. I think I was 144 and you were like 152 or something like that, right?
Yeah.
We were pretty close.
We were close
to each other,
but
we were super far from everybody else. And upon further reflection, and one thing that if I were to play this again, I would have the understanding of is that some of those point scoring opportunities in the end game can be one thing. You fulfill one contract more than somebody else, and that literally can be 200 to 300 points more than somebody else.
Right.
That's just one thing. So in
Right.
my head, I had to come to terms with this whole concept that you didn't do 700 points better than me,
Right.
Tyler. Like
Absolutely not.
you did a couple of things better than me, and it resulted in a 700 point difference. But that is exactly what Kevin said, deflating when you don't really wrap your head around that.
Thing, right?
Because the game
Yeah.
is still like, it's still, every other game I've ever played has this, like, you're a lot closer in points essentially. So like, if I see that I have a score difference of hundreds and hundreds of points based off of my experience with every other game I've played, that means I suck at board games, essentially.
Yeah.
But I think it's really interesting because Ben got off to a rough start, and I was starting to feel bad for him. You know, I taught it. I want everybody to have fun, right? And there was a round where you bought at the market a good that he could afford that he needed to build another track.
And by buying it, it made it just barely too expensive for him to use.
And so he got delayed on building a track yet another round, and I was feeling really bad for him. Well, all of a sudden, this game is played over 8 rounds or less if somebody gets to Trieste faster, but a couple rounds later, all of a sudden, he's expanding and building like crazy, and I'm like, I didn't think any of us were going to get to the city, and then all of a sudden he gets there, and it
changed the dynamic of the whole game.
And we talked about this after we finished. If he hadn't have gotten there, all of our scores, I don't know who would have won.
No, it would have been a lot closer.
They were all
We would have all been like 1 to 200 range.
right.
Right.
And I think it's really interesting. I think you could play it different ways. You could just load up on tons of contracts, which attracts investors and lets you sell your stock at a higher price, hoping that nobody makes it to Trieste. Or, not go that route and try and play it safe. I mean, there's a lot
There's
going on
so
there
many
and there.
paths to victory in this game, right? Like there's so many different options that you can take. And that was one thing as I was playing it. The whole game, I felt like I was having a good time, even though I felt challenged every step of the way to feel like I do not have enough resources to be able to do anything that I want to do. How do I figure out and make this puzzle work for me so that I can do the next thing that I want to do? And that was really interesting, and I liked that a lot. My big issue is you talked about Ben's moment where he had a make it or break it moment, essentially, right? And he ended up turning it around and making it out of that. I had a moment that was in the second to last round where Tyler ended up going in a spot that I was going. He built a factory in a spot that I was going to build a factory. And I was like, oh, that's unfortunate. That's okay. There was 2 spots for a factory there. I can build in the second factory, but I just got to get this one last resource to be able to do so. So I went and I got this last resource. And the very next turn, I didn't see it coming. Tyler had enough to build a second factory in the same place and blocked me out, which totally made it so that experience that Ben had where we thought, oh, how does he come back from this, was the exact experience I was having in that moment. I was like, I don't see a way to come back from this. And it was the end of the game.
It turns out you
I couldn't. And in fact, that very next round, Kevin and I discussed what's the optimal plays for us here. And I had to find ways to use my actions to not lose money. Like
More quarterbacking going on.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just kidding.
with the point difference of 700 for the lead.
Yeah.
Right?
Quarterbacking on who is not coming in last, right?
Yeah, exactly, which ended up being me by 8 points.
Yeah.
So same thing happened to me, though, earlier on in the game. I needed 2 extra irons to build to 2 cities that I wanted to build to. I took the action to get those goods, and then on that very next turn, Ben built those same tracks, and I was like, "Blah!" And he got the bonuses from those cities. He ended up stealing the factory locations.
And I think that's what's so cool about the game is that it does have those moments, but when you're on the receiving end
Absolutely.
and when you don't know how to play, particularly in a learning game, right?
Yes, just
you
absolutely.
don't see,
Yeah.
you can't see how to get out of that hole you've dug yourself in.
And I tried to cover some of the nuances of the scoring. I don't know that you
can't
can do a.
Well, it's not.
That's
like,
one of those
I
games
watched a
you
video,
just have to play.
I listened to your rules explanation. I asked questions. I even asked a question specifically about what are your typical point ranges, and you gave a great answer. I just didn't realize,
You don't
I didn't
know
process
until
it.
you've played
Yeah.
the game,
Yeah.
right? It's a very tight game. Resources are tight. It's a very unforgiving game, like you mentioned. It's not impossible to come back from mistakes, like you explained with Ben, but it can be difficult, especially if you haven't played the game before,
Right.
and it can kind of snowball a little bit.
Yeah, and
right?
it's a long play. I mean,
It
we
is.
played 2 or 3 hours.
Yeah.
It's a big investment time, and to stretch that struggle over that time is a little rough.
But with that said, it would reward multiple plays. Like if you
And if you don't, then you're going to have the exact same experience the next time you play, if that's a good amount in between plays, because you're going to have to relearn everything.
Yeah, so I've had some negative things to say about the game, but I'm interested in playing it again. It's like the On Mars play that we had, and we talked about, hey, we need to play this game right away. So all this time we've invested in it.
That
just
was 2 months ago.
doesn't go to waste. That was 2 months ago, and I think we've lost all of that learning, right?
Yeah.
So
This is that type of
we
game,
need to
right?
correct that with this game.
I think we should absolutely play it
So-
again, and I think it could be a game that makes the rotation, right?
The big difference for me, like the one thing that I think will make my experience better, regardless if I win or lose in the subsequent plays, is understanding that difference between there are points scoring opportunities for literally hundreds and hundreds of points. So 1 to 300 points is not out of the range of possibility if you're able to get one thing more than your other player. So to make and understand that, for me, helps me understand that I am not a terrible sucky board game player. It's just this game has a lot of point scoring opportunities in big ways.
Well, usually you're not.
Thank you.
I couldn't wait to get this game. I've been excited about this game since I saw it announced. I finally got it at the table. The table presence is awesome. The components are nice. The art's beautiful. I loved it. It immediately, it's a short list. We're coming up on the end of January, but it immediately jumped to the top of my new to me list for 2022. And I could very well see it, staying there in the top 5 by the end of the year. I can't wait to play this game again. Every single turn and every single decision, I loved the play. And I had gone through it the night before to try and learn it so that I could teach it. So I had a leg up for sure on the overall experience of the game, but I can't wait to play it again.
Yeah, that's why I think my second play, third play will be a better experience, just because I know what I'm getting into this time.
Yeah.
Right. You know what to kind of look out for, and like you said, Tyson, if you lose by 500 points, it doesn't mean you're a terrible player. So there you go.
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily, right. All right, another train game that we've been playing quite a bit lately, actually, is a game called Railroad Inc. Very loose definition of a train game here. We've been playing it a lot on BGA, which is a fantastic implementation of the game. The way that the game plays is you have 4 dice that have various railroad tracks, either straight or curved, and then there's other dice that have roads. There's a bridge with a railroad going underneath it. You roll these dice, and then you have to draw on your board whatever you rolled. So it's a square, it's like a grid that you're drawing on. There are exit points on the grid that are either a road or a railroad. And you have to connect to either an existing railroad or road that you've put on the board, or one of these exit points. So you roll the dice, you draw on your board the routes, and then you do it again. It plays over 7 rounds, unless you play with an expansion, and that typically reduces the rounds to 6. The expansions add different things. You can be drawing rivers on the board. You can be drawing lava flows from a volcano. You can there's meteors that can come down and destroy your tracks. There's different rules associated with all this stuff. There's a ton of other expansions that I haven't even explored yet, but things that you can throw into the game. It's a lot of fun. I've had a good time playing it. What do you guys think of Railroad Inc.?
I think it's been a blast to play. I particularly enjoy playing on Board Game Arena. You mentioned drawing volcanoes and drawing. I love just clicking a button.
It is nice. It is nice.
Clicking a mouse click and adding my feature and not having to draw it. And it plays really fast. And I can, select and then, change my mind and move it somewhere else. So I don't have to use an eraser. It's a lot of fun. All the expansions are great. My favorite one is the volcano one. I think it's really fun trying to fit this growing volcano in the middle of all of your roads and tracks and trying not to destroy them when you have to build it in certain directions. And I don't know. It's a fun game.
Yeah, I love the fact that everybody has the same pool of dice.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah,
and you get to the end of the game and you look at everybody's boards and it's just vastly different, right?
Yep.
Like the routes people take are completely different. The way people think about the game is just different. It's fun for me to see that. And I actually like the physical version.
Yeah.
I like drawing the routes and, actually doing that. It's kind of, for some reason, for me, a little bit relaxing. It's just kind of a fun game for me to play with my family. My wife loves it. My daughter loves it. That's a part that I actually enjoy about it. But there is a benefit to the BGA version where you're just clicking. You can undo. You don't have to erase. It's a lot less messy.
We've played together 22 games. That doesn't mean I've played 22 games.
How many?
Just checked. I've won 0 of 22 games.
This goes back to you sucking at games, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That was a little harsh. I'm sorry. I was a little harsh.
Yeah. Wow. How many of the train games that we've talked about have you won?
Actually, I have not won many. So that is true. That is true.
Of the 22 games, so that says something, right? Like, I've not won a single one of these, but I've played 22 times, and I enjoy this process every time. It doesn't matter if I win. Now, I am a little bit salty about the last game we played because I was doing so well. At the end of the game, I had 59 points. The next person below me had 49 points, down to like 20-something points. I was like, I got this. Somehow Kevin pulls out 70 points in the last round. That. And I was like, what? This was my one chance to win this game.
Everything worked out perfectly for me on that game. I had the river that went all the way along the board, and then the last river die that was
last river ruined me.
Was perfect to get me to the edge, and I think you get bonus points for completing from edge to edge, right?
That's what
I had very few open connections, and it just worked out well. So that's like you played a great game, but it just worked out perfectly for me.
You played amazing. I saw in the 5th round your score was high.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, Tyson looks like he's got this one. It was like the other day when we finished Azul and I scored 100 points, and I was like, I freaking got this, man. This one was mine. And then Kevin scored 102.
Which scoring 100 points in Azul never happens.
Yeah,
right?
I mean,
those two people in the same game.
Yeah, I mean, unless you're tracking how many tiles are left in the bag with a spreadsheet, I mean, those are good scores.
Those are great scores.
But I think that says something about Railroad Inc., though. Like I said, I think the fact that I've played this game so many times, never won it, but keep coming back to it, and the fact that it's different because you can add all of these different expansions and styles of plays. I like that about that. I think my favorite, though, that we've played is the Meteor one. I like that one.
Oh, you like that one? Yeah. That one is fun. It's cool how when you end a route in a Meteor, it gives you points. Right?
Yeah.
It's just a different dynamic, right?
That was the same thing with the last time. The last one we played was a Meteor one before this river one. And I was doing so well on that one, too. And then Tyler ended up coming and making, like, millions out of his meteorite.
So I played the volcano one a couple times where I was thinking we were playing the meteorite one. So I was trying to end some of my stuff into the volcano. I was like, wait a second, I'm not getting points for this. So since then, I started winning the volcano
You've been doing a little bit better.
I have, yeah.
I don't understand why these railroad and road companies are investing in building so close to volcanoes and meteorite like locations that
thematically that breaks down a little bit, doesn't it? Yeah.
A little bit.
you know.
But it's such a quick,
Oh yeah.
Oh, it's
easy,
awesome.
simple design. I mean, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I bet they had a Kickstarter not too long ago, and I ended up backing that Kickstarter. It comes with this awesome box that you can put all the expansions into, and then it comes with just a ton of these mini expansions that are just 2 dice in these little tuck boxes. And I've explored those just barely, right? Maybe 1 or 2 of those expansions, and it completely changes the game. It changes how you think about the game, how the scoring works. It comes with these mega boards. Haven't even played with those yet, but they look awesome.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
We should play with those maybe is it still in the filler weight?
Yeah, it's still in the
We
filler
should do
weight, but
that one night.
I'm sure I haven't read the rules, but I'm sure it adds to the length of the game a little bit. But yeah, I should definitely bring that, as long as you're okay with physically drawing on the board. You know,
I might get a
after
scribe.
you might get Logan down here to help
Logan
you
will
out.
do that.
Yeah,
Yeah, all I've got is the base game, and I think that's just got the rivers.
you get the
Or
blue, the deep blue
one.
edition.
I don't know if that's the base game or not, but yeah.
Yeah, it's one of the 2 originals that came out, the blue and the red, and then through the Kickstarter they have the yellow and the green.
Are we talking about Pokemon again?
Yeah,
Or somehow?
we transitioned to Pokemon.
Gotcha.
You're keeping up, so yeah. So that is Railroad Inc.
All right, so that about wraps up all the train games we've been playing lately, except for, of course, Railways of the World, which we're going to jump into now. We're going to kick that off with a rules overview by Kevin.
Welcome to the age of railroading. You are a railroad baron making profits by delivering passengers and finished goods. The potential earnings are great, but who will be the most successful? You decide the best routes and build track. You run the railroad and deliver the goods, thus capturing that share of the market for your railroad. As your network of rails expands across the countryside, you invest in newer, better locomotives to deliver the goods faster and farther. Can you rewrite the annals of history and engrave your name alongside the world's greatest railroad barons? Railroads of the World is designed by Martin Wallace and Glenn Drover and originally came out in 2005 under the name Railroad Tycoon. There have been a number of versions that have come out since then, ending in the most recent version in 2017 called Railways of the World 10th Anniversary Edition. To start Railways of the World, a map is selected and goods cubes are randomly placed on each city on the board. All other game components are placed next to the board within easy reach of the players if possible. Railroad operations cards are then set up based on player count, and all players are given 2 railroad barons, which they select one to be their secret objective during the game. Railways of the World is played over a number of turns until a certain number of empty city markers are placed on the board based on player count. Cities are empty if they no longer contain any goods cubes. Once the endgame is triggered, the current round ends and one more turn is played. A turn consists of the following 3 phases. First is the first player auction, second is player actions, and third is income and dividends. The first player auction is pretty self-explanatory. Players go around the table clockwise, outbidding each other until everyone passes except for one person. It's important to note that nobody starts with money in the game. Anytime you are required to pay, you must take out a bond. One bond will give you $5,000 and can never be paid back. After the first player auction, players will then take a player action in a clockwise direction, starting with the auction winner. Player actions include building tracks, urbanizing, upgrading engines, delivering one goods cube, or selecting a railroad operations card. Building tracks just means you select a hex on the board and place a track hex, paying the requisite cost. Up to 4 tracks can be placed on a single action. Urbanizing means you select a gray city and place a new city tile on top of it. You then place 2 random goods cubes on that city. To upgrade your engines, you pay the cost for the next engine level to the bank. For each engine level you have, a goods cube can be delivered 1 link of track. Delivering a goods cube means you select 1 goods cube from a city and deliver the cube to a city that has the same color as that goods cube. You can deliver a cube up to as many track links as your current engine level. Your scoring marker moves 1 space on the income track for each link you deliver. You can use other players' links to deliver the cube if you would like. For each borrowed link, the player you borrowed from gets to move 1 space on the income track. The final action is selecting a railroad operations card. There are a number of different cards in the game, that will allow you to build track for cheaper, get additional points for deliveries, or place additional goods cubes on the board, for example. The third step in a turn is income and dividends. After all players have taken 3 actions, everyone will get income based on where their player marker is on the income track. After income is received, players pay $1,000 for each bond certificate that they have taken during the game. If you don't have enough to pay for your bonds, you need to take out another bond to pay. Turns continue until, as I mentioned before, a certain number of empty city markers are placed on the board based on player count. After the game ends, Rail Baron cards are revealed, and players get points if their card is fulfilled. Players then lose 1 space on the track for each bond they have taken out. Each space on the income track is 1 victory point. Whoever has the most victory points is the winner. So that's a brief overview of how you play. Let's get back to the table and see what we thought about Railways of the World.
Thanks, Kevin, for the rules overview of Railways of the World. We've been playing this a fair amount lately. I think one of the first things that comes to mind when we played this was the production of this game. Kevin has this game, and he brought the big box version that eagle-gryphon put out that has like this beautiful like box, and all the board is great. And it's got so many nice little components that the production in this game, I think, is like any other eagle-gryphon game, top-notch. I think, though, there was a couple of things about the production that don't necessarily work perfectly, and I don't think that's a product of what existed. I think that eagle-gryphon was trying to keep, essentially, the game true to its original form. But I think that some of the issues I have... So in the game, you have the major line options, and they're connecting one city to another. But if you don't know where those cities are geographically, because this is Railways of the World, there's a lot of different maps you can play in this game. If you're not familiar with a territory, it can be really hard to be like, wait, where is this city and where is the city it's supposed to get to? It doesn't intuitively necessarily make sense to me. And there's no like symbol on a city that is a major line city. And that was one of the production issues that I saw with this game.
There may be letters on the board that match up to the city, but but it's not.
It doesn't stand out.
It doesn't stand out at all. And there's been, I think, a lot of people who have made things that you can place on those major cities to identify them. So you actually put them on the board, similar to the empty city marker type of things. So you can have a visual representation of what those major lines are, and that. It's kind of a shame that doesn't come in the box, because I think that would have been
agreed.
Money well spent, and I would have spent a few extra bucks just to have that.
Yeah, no, and that was exactly my experience with this game, is that I felt like the production overall of this game is high quality. There's a lot of great bits and pieces, and the trains look great, and the even those empty city markers are really fun to have. They're clear and easy to sight on that board, but there was just a couple of things, mainly the fact that there are some symbols that it's hard to locate. Or like if you're building a rail to a city, and the connection that it makes is under that city, it will cover up the name of that city. So it's hard to sometimes see what names of certain cities are, and those can get lost. You can lose track of a city. So this game has I should probably step back a bit and just say that like the boards on this game are ginormous, right? Like you have sprawling boards, and like depending on what you're playing, if you're playing the Eastern United States board or the Western United States board, this game is huge, and it can be super hard to see across the table to see where they are in the first place, but then you hide a name of a city under it, and it becomes really difficult to see.
No, the boards they're big, they're beautiful. The art's not quite as pretty as Imperial Steam or other games that we've seen, but it still has an impressive presence on the table.
Yeah, it does. I love games that just look kind of epic. Right. And I love this game where you're putting tracks on the board, you're putting trains, and as the game goes on, the board looks better and better, right? Everybody's just going everywhere. I just think it looks really cool. So the fact that the board is enormous is, I don't think, a negative for me, other than not being able to see the other side as easily as maybe some other games.
Well, and if you're familiar, as you become familiar with the game, that becomes less and less of an issue. So it's not like that big of a deal. But
I
it was
didn't.
just
Yeah, I didn't feel like that was an issue in this one. And we've played other games like Praga where not being able to see the other side of the board is it.
it impacts your gameplay.
Yeah, and I didn't feel like that in this game at all.
Yeah, because it's just a sea of hexes.
Yep.
Right?
And it's,
between cities.
It's easy
right?
to pick out
Yeah.
what's available as far as routes that are still open. And
Well, and I like that so each hex can have different symbols in it. So if it's a river, it can have a little water droplet symbol, or if it's a mountain terrain, it has a little kind of stone circle symbol in there. And I like the simplicity of those because it doesn't detract from that artwork. You get to see that whole topographical artwork and I think it's a really well done, kind of true to form artwork that has been done that makes it so that yes, there are a bunch of hexes and it is a board game, but it's also like it looks like a map in a good way.
No, I love the fact that they have the water droplet and then that little circle. I've played games that have a similar things on the board that don't have that, and it drives me nuts. Have you guys played Babylonia before? It's a great game. It's a Reiner Knizia game, but trying to distinguish what is a river and what is not a river, if you've played it, you know what I mean. It's terrible. You play it a few times and you kind of get it, but that first play, you're like, well, can I build there? Can I put something there? It drives me nuts. But this one is very clear. It's very clean, and it was just a simple way to show what that terrain type is.
Well, even Irish Gauge that we talked about earlier has some of that. Like there was just a couple of spaces that, can I actually build here? This looks like it's water, right? And so it was a question, and this doesn't leave any questions. Railways of the World doesn't leave any question as to what terrain type you're going to build on. So, yeah.
One other thing production-wise that kind of drives me crazy when we're playing the physical version, you can put a new city tile on top of a gray city. But there's you don't see what connections are coming out of that once you place that on top. So you're like, can I actually go there? You got to pick it up and you got to look there to see if you can actually get into the city or not. Small gripe, right? But still, it's like once you get all that stuff on there, you got to kind of unpack it a little bit and see what's underneath.
And I understand why they did that one for the sake of, because like not every city is going to have the same types of connections to it. So you can't like make a standardized one, but
I understand why
it is problematic in that similar to covering up the name of the city, it takes it so that you have to move some component to be certain.
Right.
And if that's...
Which, I mean, that's a small...
But
really,
if
it is a small gripe.
It is, except for if it's in a gameplay standpoint where you're not sure where it is or what I can do, and I have to go show I'm possibly going to look at this location, which means that I may be building there on my next turn. So
small gripe, but something to think about for sure.
Overall, I think the production is great on this game. Let's move on, though, to the gameplay itself. There's a lot to like about this game, so let's start with what we like about this game. Kevin, do you want to tell us some of the things that you kind of like about this game?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot that I like about this game. I think my favorite part of the game is the variable setup of the goods cubes. So to start the game off, every city gets a certain amount of goods cubes based on the player count, right? So you randomly take these from the bag and you put them on the city. Once that gets all set up, I think it's fascinating to look at the board and to kind of start planning what you think your long-term strategy is going to be. That could change depending on what people do, and it does change very frequently, but getting that planned out in my mind is just super interesting to me. If there's a lot of blue cubes over here, for example, and there's a blue city, I'm like, okay, I think I'm going to start there. And I got a lot of delivery options, for example. Or you get bonuses for delivering to certain cities first. I'm going to go, I think I'm going to go down here first, and then this major connection is kind of close there. I think I may try and work towards that. And there's lots of stuff I can deliver in that section. So kind of figuring that out when the game first starts is kind of, it's fun for me to look at that. And especially when you're at the physical version and you see that big board and you're just kind of studying it for a while.
Yeah.
It's just fun. I like
because that random setup essentially makes it so there become optimal plays,
Yes.
which feeds in that very next thing. One of the things I like about
Right.
the game is that you have that auction, and this auction it's great, and it's slightly different than other auctions. I mean, it's an auction as is normal, but particularly that first auction, because you have no money at the start of this game. Nobody starts with any money whatsoever, so you can go ahead and start bidding money you don't have at the start of this auction
Just to go first.
just so that you can go first. But by doing so, you're saying, I'm going to take some bonds, potentially multiple bonds, so that I can have the optimal first start play because of that randomized setup. And I think that's so cool.
Right.
Because it now means that, okay, how much am I willing to sacrifice at the start of the game so that I can get some of these best things early on in the game to hopefully propel myself forward throughout this game.
Because you can never pay those bonds back, and
No.
they are negative victory points at the end of the game.
And they're paying every time.
Yeah, they count against your income every round.
Right.
I like how the cards are different at the start of every game, and that changes up, what you're going to do and what you're looking to do at the start of every game. It's different. However, if you don't find that synergy or someone else beats you to it, it does get you off to a rough start, and it is hard to come back in this game.
I think this, and we'll get into exactly some of the things that we don't like, but I think that is one of the things kind of foreshadowing, similar to Imperial Steam, where there are potentials where if you don't know what you're doing and you're new to the game, particularly if you're playing with experienced players, you have the potential where if you can't see those connections early on, it can be hard to figure out how to make up the steam.
And sometimes make up the steam. Okay. All right. I almost missed that one.
I know.
Well, and depending on the variable setup, there could only be one optimal space to go, right?
Right.
One spot that has a delivery bonus that has a cube that's adjacent to it, right? There could be games where there's 3 or 4 or 2, but there could be one spot that's optimal, and that's what makes that auction so important. Like I think we've gone up to 7 or 8, thousand for that first auction.
Oh yeah.
and which
Because
is crazy, right? Because you have to take out 2 bonds. You're in the hole for 2, but if you get that first delivery bonus, I think it gives you like 5
to 6,
5 to
depending
6
on
points
what,
to start off.
Yeah.
So you're making that up right away, but you got that negative. So it's an interesting decision.
It absolutely is. I think, though, one of the cool ways that you can make up potential points that I really like about this game, and this is familiar to some of the other train games we've talked about already, but I think that Railways of the World does it in a way that I particularly like, is that similar to like Iberian Gauge or even Imperial Steam, where there's that kind of borrowing tracks that you didn't lay, this Railways of the World allows you to, at any time, use somebody else's track to complete a delivery or to do a partial delivery for. As long as that first track is yours, you can use whomever's tracks you choose, which can be really cool. Like the first game we played, I remember playing, and Dan just fed me points the entire game, and I was like, because of where I placed my rails, he had like no alternative but to give me some points, and that was really cool because I didn't have to do anything on his turn, but I still would make points off of it.
Well, I loved one of the games we played on BGA right at the start. You built the leg that was needed to deliver a good for one of the bonus cards. And you built it, and I was like, sweet. I'd already upgraded my train to be able to deliver 2 legs, and I stole it from you, and I was like, yeah, that was awesome. And then I don't know that you ever rebounded.
No.
And there was a couple other things that happened early on in that game.
You played everything right on that. Like, you stole from me in that game so many times in the perfect way that it just
shot
you ahead so far, and it was the perfect place,
game,
but
right?
it also made me impossible to get back. But I couldn't help but respect the plays that were made, because I was like, I can't believe I didn't see that. That was fantastic of you. That was obviously the best decision you could have made.
I really like this game. I think it's a lot of fun. The first game, I've only played it once on the table, and all of my other 5 or 6 plays have been on BGA. That first play on the table, it was an awesome experience. Man, did I get off to a crummy start. And I was trailing the whole game, but I still had fun. It was still fun trying to figure things out and still learning the game. And I couldn't wait to play it again. It was after we played on the table that we saw that it was on BGA, and it was like, yes!
Yeah,
And
I love that.
I love that there are different maps. There's, we're playing right now in Mexico. We've played that a couple times, and it's a completely different game than playing the Eastern or Western United States. It's just a lot of fun.
And it changes it up just a little bit. There's a map, the Portugal map.
I love the Portugal map.
Is a Vital Lacerda design, which I think that one probably switches it up the most out of any that we've played so far.
Yeah, it had those weird
maritime lines.
The maritime lines,
Yeah.
And it's just interesting. There's a lot of different mini expansions you can throw in there. The rotors, the mines, I think we're experimenting with now.
Oh, yeah, I forgot we can use those.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
which just switches it up a little bit. What makes it fresh and fun, right?
So one thing, and this will lead into some of the things I think that I'm not so fond of the game, is you brought up the rotors, Kevin. And the rotors are cool because they essentially allow you to kind of have a single city that is typically only one color, right? It's say it's a black city, so you could only deliver black goods to it. But by putting those rotors in it, you can sometimes get that every time a good is delivered of a rotor color, so it adds half of that city becomes a different color. Every time a good is delivered to that city of that color, it ends up switching to a different color, which is, I think, really cool. My big gripe about it is the last 2 games that we've played, I haven't realized, every time I deliver there, it doesn't count towards the deliver 4 goods of a different type goal.
Oh, it doesn't.
It doesn't? I did not know that.
I didn't notice that.
And it's made it so that I'll deliver a good of a different type specifically because I want to achieve that achievement card or whatever it's called. But it sets me back a turn because apparently, even though a certain city is requesting a specific color, they're not officially that color. So by delivering that good, it doesn't count as delivering it for the card goal.
I did not know that.
I didn't notice that.
That is a little bit of a bummer.
And it's a small gripe, but it was enough that it set me back a couple of turns each time I've done it.
I liked there was a card in the Mexico game. Maybe this is in all of them. I don't know if I've seen the whole deck or not, but it lets you add a train to someone else's route, and anytime they deliver on that route, you get a bonus point.
You milked that last game.
It was awesome. I was like, when you
Yeah.
delivered a ton, you had tons of opportunity to deliver to that city, one of the cities that was on the end of it, and it was awesome. It was and you still end up, you won.
But you got a lot of points off of that.
I did.
And that kind of leads me to another thing I like about the game is those cards, the railroad operations cards are a lot of fun. And seeing what new card comes out for the following round and how that affects the auction, because it could be a really good card that a lot of people want, that's just interesting. Trying to get those cards to match up with your strategy. Like on the Mexico map, along the coast, there's a lot of water routes. So you can get that card that makes the water hexes cheaper, and it's only like 5,000 or 4,000 to go up the coast instead of 12 or 15,000. Right?
I had one that let me build free on water, and it was I built my
Straight
whole,
up, yeah.
and it was 0.
Yeah, which is huge because money can be pretty tight, and especially
if
early
you're
in
borrowing
the game.
those bonds, right? Because if you're
Right.
trying to make those bonds work, but there's a trade-off there, right? So with those cards, you have to make the decision of, do I essentially sacrifice a turn to pick up a card? Because I can't do anything else but just pick up a card. Mm-hmm. So I think in this game, there's a lot of little crunchy decisions to be made throughout it that makes it really satisfying when your plan comes together. Like when Tyler had those turns that were just the perfect plays. They ended up working out just right. And like I said, I couldn't help but respect the plays that he made, even though they were awful to me.
And it can be a little frustrating. Like we're playing a game on BGA now, and you guys completely shut me out of that lower right corner of Mexico.
Yes, I did.
You went deeply into debt to
Yes,
do
I
it.
did.
Like you have like 10 or 11 bonds or something, but I'm kind of by myself down there now because you guys shut me out of there. But
I feel like
that's
I'm kind of blocked out of it too. I got to one city, but I don't think I can expand from there.
So
I think
without
you're set up
coming
pretty
across
good,
from the
Tyson.
other
But you have a lot of
I
debt.
have a lot of debt. There's
right?
that trade-off. So like my whole intention with that was I want to ensure that you guys have to use my railways to be able to get anywhere between there, and it blocks certain like longest major lines out potentially. Not
But
quite.
you're only going to have a few $1,000 each turn.
Exactly,
For the
that's
next,
the problem.
2 or 3 turns.
But it doesn't
right?
pay off.
I also think it's interesting with the smaller Mexico map is we don't spend as much time up front upgrading our trains.
Right.
It's more about, hey, securing the route, getting a spot here before it gets blocked out. Then later on in the game, I'm going to upgrade my train so I can start delivering longer routes and scoring points that way.
Which is why the different map sets are so cool, because ultimately those maps and the way that cities are spaced out, the way that they're configured, end up creating a lot of variability and unique styles of play. So I think that covers probably about all of the things for now that we really enjoy about this game. Let's talk a little bit about the things that maybe we don't enjoy as much. I'm going to throw this to Tyler.
So one of the things that I don't necessarily love is that I feel like at about 50% or maybe 2/3 of the way through this game, it's usually pretty obvious who's going to win. Or there's at least one person that is, for the most part, out of the game, no matter what they do. You know, if in a 4-player game, it might still be between 2 people. A 3-player game, maybe, depending on the map. But it's fairly deterministic. Whoever gets out ahead, whoever starts, has the least amount of debt, but is still delivering really long routes and scoring points that way. I mean, there's no catching them at that point. There's not a lot of bonus points to be had. Even if you do complete a major route, it's just hard to catch up to someone once they get ahead, especially early on when they get their income ramped up right away and you're still making like $3 for the first couple rounds because of a mistake you made or just there wasn't an optimal play. It's really hard to catch up. I can't think of a play that we've had that one of us was not eliminated from the game.
Oh, that was no.
By the midpoint of the game.
No, I would agree with that mostly. The one thing that I would say counter to that slightly, I agree with like 90% of what you're saying there, is that the first game we played, you and I did not get any of the green goal cards at the start, and so we were drastically behind. And I looked at you and I said, I think we're out of it, essentially. And I said that multiple times.
Oh yeah, you said there's no way I'm
because
coming back.
I was like, there's no way I
back.
can get back from this.
You made a great comeback.
And I ended up winning, which made me feel terrible because I hate being like the complainer about it, right?
We have all done that before.
Yeah, I did that one time with Twa. I was like, man, this is the worst. Now, blah, you guys keep stealing my dice, blah, blah, blah. And then I ended up winning. And I was
And
like,
then you hang your head.
And you're like, well, that was a less impactful victory.
yeah.
So,
but I mean, and part of the way that you were able to do that, you built routes that then Dan was just
exactly
throwing you money. Or throwing you points left and right because he kept using your routes along the whole east.
He had
eastern
to have given
seaboard.
me 10 to 20 different points throughout the game.
Whereas I had no idea what I was doing initially. I went to Chicago and then I was trying to go. I was all over the place and didn't really have a plan. I had fun, but it was like, I had a terrible score.
I think that leads into something that I don't love so much about the game is that first map we played was the Eastern United States. And I felt that way about potentially, like I was out of the game because that map is so expansive, right? I ended up building in New England, like most of my game was in New England area, and so I was able to make a lot of deliveries there. But one of the things I don't like about the game is the bigger maps in general. I think I prefer the smaller maps for the most part And it may just be a style of play thing, but for me, it felt like some of the choices that I got to do, like forcing people to use my lines, is less prevalent in those larger scale maps, or being able to interact with other players is less prevalent when you have so many vast options on these larger maps.
Well, the problem I think with that first game is we played it 4-player, and that map is recommended for five or more, right? So I think I'd be interested to play with a higher player count on those larger maps to see. Obviously, there's going to be more activity on the board with more players, to see if if we're borrowing tracks more with the higher player count. I agree with you though that it's just such an expansive board that on that first play I was way to the left of the board going on those cities, and you guys were just doing your own thing on the other side, and I didn't do well. So I think
you came on strong. I mean, you were
second. You were right behind me.
Was I right behind you on that one?
Because you were. I remember I had more bonds than you in that one, and I had to find a way to stay at least 8 points ahead of you to be able to make up the difference.
Yeah, I do remember that. I'm thinking of a different game, I think.
Your network was set up that you were delivering 7 and 8 length
That's right.
goods turn after turn after turn at the end of the last few rounds, and there was no. I mean, I couldn't compete with that.
Yeah.
But I thought we played this. I set it up. I think we played a 3-player Eastern United States, and I thought it was a blast.
That's the one I'm thinking about. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Because you guys were duking it out on the East
I
Coast.
cut across the Appalachians.
Yeah.
No, that's the game that you totally destroyed me in.
Oh yeah, it was.
That's why you thought it was.
I was thinking it was Mexico. See, and I didn't love the Portugal map. I love the Mexico map. I've only played the Portugal one once. I didn't have as much fun with that one, but I'd like to play it again. This game's awesome. I mean, really small nitpicks. I mean, and things that we don't like.
Yeah, one thing that I don't necessarily like, or could be perceived as a negative, is those delivery bonuses. And we've touched on this already a little bit. They can be really powerful to start the game, and almost to the point where they're a little bit too powerful.
Yeah.
Because you're getting 6 points for one delivery, right? And if you get shut out of that, like you had mentioned, Tyler, that could set you back a little bit. Not saying you can't come back from it, but it almost seems like,
I mean,
it's a little too powerful.
6 points at the end of the game. If you get one action that does 6 points at the end of the game, is significant. Mm-hmm. But 6 points in the first 2 turns of the game,
income for you.
That's huge.
Yeah.
I do think it's funny in the current game we're playing in Mexico. There's a city that has a bonus, but it's a gray city.
I know.
And we all have the possibility of delivering to there.
Who's going to put the new city tile there?
It's kind of like when we were delivering hobos and Ride the Rails. Like,
who's going to make
the transcontinental link? Like,
it's going to be a stalemate, and nobody's going to do it.
Right.
That is my prediction.
Well,
one of the cool things about the game is, and I don't know if Mexico does it. I can't remember, but there are cards that are different for every map. So and I think it could be Mexico, but correct me if I'm wrong. There is a card that you can get that will give you 2 actions back to back. And so you can
I think that is Mexico.
That's true.
So there is a way that you could do that. So if that comes out,
that's huge.
That makes that auction so big. So it goes back to that auction for me where that could make and break it. So for going back to your complaint, Kevin, that auction in the first round can be really big. There are times where I think that it could almost lock somebody out of the game if they get last in turn order and can't make any of those deliveries and can't get any of those points. There is a potential for that. I think the more I've played the game, the less I feel like if you know what you're doing, you will actually get locked out of the game. But particularly if you're playing with people who haven't played before, there is potential to feel absolutely locked out of the game, similar to Imperial Steam.
I like the auctions. I think that it's really cool. Honestly, I only bid 10% of the time.
I know, it drives me crazy.
Oh.
Well,
because he's always last. I'm always going to be last, or Kevin's always going to be last because you choose not to participate in the auction.
I know, and that is an interesting part of it too.
But
right?
I mean,
if you're one person behind the winner, that's better than being last.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So that
Which
that is a consideration.
I
of the
see
bidding.
that Kevin bids, and I'm like, well, there's not anything super exciting about going first in this one, so
But
I'm
I can
okay
be
with going
second.
second.
Yeah, exactly.
Which locks me into having to bid a lot.
And then it's a bidding war between me and you, right?
Which
And then I'm in the position of, well, if Tyson wins, then now I'm second.
Right, exactly. So it doesn't matter
I
as
don't
much
lose
for
the
you.
money.
Yeah, and I don't lose the money.
But that does actually bring up one last thing. I know we're out of the things we like about the game, but this is kind of a thing I like and don't like. By the end of the game, money doesn't matter. This game is not about having money, except for money is the means to the end, right? So
It's the second
Machiavelli.
tiebreaker.
it's not even the first tiebreaker.
Right.
Like it doesn't. There was one game that we played, and Kevin, I think you had like $70,000 or whatever it
Right.
was, and I had like 40,000, right? And I was like, well, this is ridiculous because he could just throw out $30,000 with no problem.
So that auction was fun.
Yeah.
That was fun. That's like when you get to the end of your fantasy football auction draft and you've got like $80 to spend on a kicker. Right?
Yeah, right.
Okay, maybe not.
Well,
Maybe there's no fantasy football players here.
I am a fantasy football player.
Okay.
So I think that wraps up the things that we both like and dislike about this game. So let's go into our final thoughts of this game. I'll go ahead and start with my final thoughts of this game. Ultimately, I think this game is great. I think there's a lot to love about this game. I think that with the variety of maps that you can choose from, with the different styles of play, the different cards that come out with each of those maps, the auction that I have talked about already at length, there's so many different things about this game that's really nice. I think they all work well together. All the mechanics kind of are cohesive. I love that there is a fair amount of player interaction. It's not just a solitary game. You have to pay attention to what other people are doing on their turns and have to, in turn, make sure that you're playing in a way that they can't come back and steal it from you like Tyler was stealing, like reaping the benefits of my actions. And so I love that about the game. When it comes down to it, if I were to rate this game on our scale of 1 to 5, I would go ahead and rate this game at a 4. I don't think that this is the best game ever. I think there's a few things like we've talked about that can make this game a little bit difficult or not for everybody. The fact of it being you can get locked out. It often does feel at the end of the game where it's maybe down to 1 or 2 people as the potential winner. There are some things that make this game not quite a 5 in my book, but you put this on the table and I'm going to play it anytime that you bring it out.
Yeah, I really like this game. It's a lot of fun. I love, like I've mentioned, that you see the board when the game starts. You have your plan and you try to execute your plan. People can get in your way, and they do, but it's fun to try and see if you can get that to work. It looks epic on the table. I love placing the tracks and the trains, and the operations cards are fun, like we've talked about. There's just a lot to like about this game. I don't think I'll ever turn down an opportunity to play it. If people want to play, I'm all for it. It's that type of game. That said, it's not without some of its faults, like we've talked about before. If I'm rating it on our 1 to 5 scale, I think I'd give it a 4 as well. It's not in that upper tier of games. I love it, but it's just not quite there for me.
That is the rating that surprises me the most. I thought you might give it a 5.
Yeah.
But no, I second everything that you guys said. I don't disagree with anything that was really said tonight about this game. I enjoy playing it. It's a lot of fun. I love that it's on BGA so that we can play it more frequently. And I'm excited to explore the maps more. I'm excited for when you get Sweden. At some point, we need to figure out how to get Australia. I think that was one of the other maps.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
And that Steam Kickstarter, which I'm kicking myself that I didn't take
But
that
I
one
mean,
as well.
it's
But
eagle-gryphon, so I mean, you back a different game. We can hop on or Ben's Weather Machine
Right.
pledge and hopefully get some more maps. But you know, it's a great game. I'd also give it a 4 out of 5. So it sounds like it's 4s all around.
We steamrolled that one.
Ho!
I mean, that's a steamroller.
Choo
That's
choo!
is that a train?
A steamroller is not a train, but I felt like
Yeah, that's not even close to a train. But
Because we talked about train games exclusively in this episode, I just want to rapid fire rate these games. Not looking for an explanation. I just 1 through 5 number. We'll just go Kevin, Tyson, myself. All right. Are we okay with this? So we'll go
let's do it.
Irish Gauge.
3.
3.
2. Ride the Rails. Kevin,
3.
Tyson,
3.
3 for me. Iberian Gauge, Kevin.
3, slightly higher 3, but still 3.
Yeah, this is a 3 for me as well. They're all 3s, but different
Varying
areas
degrees
of
of
3.
3s. Maybe we should go to a bigger scale. No. It's also a 3 for me. Imperial Steam, Kevin.
First play 2, subsequent plays probably going up.
Okay.
Yeah, first play is 3, but I'm guessing I'll settle on a 4.
If I could give this a 6, I'd give it a 6.
Whoa,
That's
whoa,
how
whoa.
excited I am about this game. And then Railroad Inc., Kevin.
4.
I put that as 5.
You thinking 5?
I think for what it is as a
Yes,
filler,
exactly.
it's a 5 as a filler.
Okay. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. It's not going to be the game that you're playing as your mainstay game for an evening, but it's a game that I will always. I've played 22 games, like I said, never won.
And
I will always play the
fruitless,
game.
Okay.
22 fruitless games.
Right, exactly.
And you're still coming back.
Exactly.
Filler scale 5.
We've got
If we're going-
a score correction, ladies and gentlemen. All right. So, and then obviously we all gave Force to Railways of the World. That about wraps up this episode. If you noticed, we did not discuss any 18XX games. I don't think any of us really have opened that can yet. I did back Shikoku 1889, which I am excited to try out. Hopefully we'll get that this year. But other than that, I don't think we have anything else, right?
It's a lot of train games we talked about.
That was a lot of train games that we talked about.
Yep.
And we've only scratched the surface of train games. Like, I think for me, before this, I haven't played a ton of train games. And so
Yeah.
I think that after all of the train games we've just discussed and played, I'm more interested in checking out more of these.
Yeah.
I think of all the games train games we played, I choose Railways
Imperial Steam.
of the World.
Brilliant. Wonderful.
Thanks.
And we left games like Ticket to Ride Off,
Oh,
Great
classic.
Western Trail. I mean, there are other train games. I mean, games with trains.
Games with trains.
that
yeah.
we could have talked about.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But yeah, I'm looking forward to exploring more of this genre. So that wraps up everything for us in this episode. We just want to say thanks for listening. And if you want more Longest Turn in your life, feel free to check us out on social media. We're on Facebook. We're on Instagram. We show pictures of all of the plays that we do there, as well as anything that we're playing lately that we haven't talked about on the podcast. In addition, we've been doing a lot of blogging on Board Game Geek. We've got a blog for The Longest Turn there. Go and check it out. You can also check us out in our guild 3947.
6 members now, right?
Yeah. We're keeping
Seven.
7 members.
We're keeping pace.
Yeah.
We also started a board game arena group, The Longest Turn. If you think we're idiots and you want to prove it, challenge us to a game on Board Game Arena and show us up.
Or if you just want to have a good time, play with us on board.
Oh,
If you have nothing to prove and
that
just
came
wanna-
across a little intense, didn't it?
Dude, just play a game with us.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
just have,
no, of
just
course.
have fun. you know.
Play to have fun and to win the game.
But also you
Correct.
can show Tyler up. That's okay too.
Well, we're all for that.
Yeah, challenge Tyson to Railroad Inc.
Yeah, because
And
you'll
you
win.
will
You need
win.
a confidence booster.
Yeah, if you need to feel better about yourself, play a Tyson and
Yeah.
Railroading.
Well, I think that again wraps it up for this episode. We appreciate you listening. If you have any suggestions or feedback, please go ahead and reach out to us on Board Game Geek. Reach out to us. We have an email.
The longest turn at gmail.com.
That's it.
That's a tough one.
Thanks for listening.
Goedenavond.
See ya.
Later.
To start,
This is Tyler.
this is Kevin.
This is Tyson.
My name is Tyler.
This is Kevin.
This is Tyson.
I did
Sorry.
it wrong. I did it different.
Yes,
I did it wrong? What did I do?
Okay, we'll start over.
I'm fumbling all over myself.
At least in the formal parts.
Formal fumbling? What?
I don't.
We're good. We just caught the 310 to Yuma.
Nope.
Nope.
I went maybe with the flattest one yet. Training day.
All right. Training. Nice.
That one was actually pretty funny.
Yeah, whatever, Tyson.
If we were going to just name movies, might as well make it funny.
Stop stealing my steam.
Still continuing with this.
All right. Thanks, Kevin, for the rules overview.
No, I'm not saying
Were you
that.
just making fun of him again?
Yeah.
No,
It's continuing.
I
My
that
gosh.
wasn't. That was my not my
Imitation
Tyson.
of me.
Imitation
No,
of Tyson.
No.
There was a dumb sounding dinosaur.
Well, now we're on to production.
Yeah. Some Disney character of some sort.
Barney.
Tyson's turned into Barney,
Hey, kids.
big purple dinosaur.
Thanks, Kevin, for the rules explanation of Railways to the World. To the world?
Railways of the world.
If a player reaches Trista, is it Trista or Treast?
I have no idea.
Trista, dang.
I don't know.
If a player reaches Trista,
Is it Treast or Treasta?
Well, like we've said, that wraps up everything for us. Well, I think that wraps up.
derailed.
That was a train wreck.
Oh, dude, there's so many and they're so terrible.